Speaker Sarah Dorner will be joining us. With that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Biondo. Present. Mr. Booker.
Present.
Mr. Boomer. Mrs. Crosby.
Here.
Mr. Fellers.
Here.
Mr. Fiducia.
Here.
Mr. Girl.
Present.
Mrs. Goro.
Present.
Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Jury.
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. McDonald.
Present.
Mr. Nicolosi.
Here.
Mrs. Red.
Present.
Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Tassoni.
Present.
Mr. Webster.
Here.
Mr. Westcott.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Present.
All 20 members present.
Thank you very much. We do have a few guests. I want to acknowledge the Chief Judge is here tonight and Mr. St. Dean from the Park District. Thank you for being here. We also have 5 seniors from Auburn High School. We have Ruby Garcia, Naya Ruiz Jimenez, Louis Ryan, we have Barry Soto, and we have Anamari Villegas joining us from Auburn, all seniors, so thank you. And again, you must be in the doghouse at school if you've got to come watch a county board meeting. But thank you very much for being here. With that, we will ask everybody to stand for the invocation and pledge. And tonight we have an outside guest, Corey Whitford from Riverside Community Church. And I will ask Pastor to come on up here.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you bow your heads in prayer with me? Gracious Father, we want to start by saying thank you for bringing us all here safely tonight. And God, we want to thank you for the abundant blessings that you've given each and every one of us. Father, we want to thank you for Jesus and for what he means and what he does through all of us. God, we thank you for the honor to do the job that we do each and every day. And so, Father, I would ask that you would bless each and every person here this evening, that you would be with them, that you would be their leader, their guide, that you would cover them with your grace and your mercy. We thank you for all these things, Father. We thank you for a wonderful county. We thank you for wonderful relationships, for all things. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Our first item of business, I believe Senator Severson and a representative out of Joe Sosnowski's office are going to come on up. Senator, come on up here. We have some recognition of our board members. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure on behalf of Representative Sosnowski, who could not be here, and myself tonight, just to take a second to honor Ted Biondo and his years of service to our community. And Ted, as you know, really epitomizes what the founding fathers talked about when they talked about citizen legislators, people that would serve their government and yet continue to work and live among the people that they passed rules and laws on. Ted, over all the years, whether it was with the school board or at Rock Valley College or here on the county board, as an individual who did his homework, always represented the taxpayers and learned how to ask a lot of questions. And when the answers to those questions didn't look right, he would go back and he would do his homework. And didn't take long before people would learn not to question his facts. They may differ with him on philosophical issues, but I think most people, most bureaucrats, most of the media learned quickly not to question his homework that he's done. And because of the work that he has done in holding government accountable, he's been able to save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars And then the ripple effect of those savings will continue to be felt long after Ted's gone. And the important thing about Ted was those savings didn't come from slashing or cutting programs. Those savings came from finding better ways to deliver government services in ways to get better results. And every organization that Ted left, whether the school district, the Rock Valley College, or now the county, he has left them in a better position than when it was when he came in. And so, Ted, on behalf of the state of Illinois, we want to thank you for your decades of tireless work on behalf of making this community a better place to live and work and raise our families. And if you'd like to come up, we'd like to present you with a plaque. And thank you.
This is only 1 minute. Not my usual, so I didn't have to study this. I just wanted to say that as the senator says, I've always fought for my constituents, and as a result have helped reduce their taxes literally by hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 25 years on the school board, Rock Valley College, and members of the Winnebago County Board. I've also tried to inform them, my constituents, as a member of the Rockville Register-Star editorial board, and in numerous op-eds over the years concerning government functions. As a county board member, I have appeared before the Illinois Supreme Court in a losing battle, but it did set a precedent so that no one went through what I did 9 years ago. Governing county election laws regarding vacancies, and my second trip involving a case before that court in the last 25 years. As a member of RSD 205, I was before the United States Court of Appeals, 7th Circuit in Chicago, dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars in those decisions. Lastly, as a member of the county board, I'm proud of helping actually defeat the home rule deal the referendum, because I believe that saved taxpayers a potentially unlimited amount of taxes which could have been levied without their approval. But I do have one request, and I would like the board to consider, when I leave, appointing board member Jaime Salgado as the future chairman of the Finance Committee. Not only does he have the aptitude, but the proper attitude for the job, and will provide the leadership and rationale to make the best decisions for Winnebago County and our constituents. I'd like to thank you all for your bipartisan help over the years and the friendships I have made over the last 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Our next item of business presentations, I have Mr. Alan Zeiss, Executive Director of the Winnebago County Housing Authority, has a brief update for us. Thank you for being here, Alan.
Thank you.
I think he's bringing his board president, Mr. Westcott, up as well.
I'm waiting for the magic. Oh, there it is. Oh, thank you. This is Jane Addams in Chicago. I had the opportunity to see this about 15 years ago after the last family moved out. And unfortunately, this becomes iconic of what public housing is. So I so appreciate the opportunity to come to you tonight and show you what your housing authority is. The Housing Authority, you formed it in 1940, September, 2 weeks after President Roosevelt enacted the draft. And it was set up to house the veterans and their families that were expected at Camp Grant. And our very first project was the $40 million mixed finance Hope 6 project, which was a neighborhood infill over on the southwest side. This was 104 homes. This has a 15-year tax credit compliance. It ends in about 24 months, and it looks exactly like it does right now. The picture up there is from just this past summer. And then from that, we wanted to make sure that we protected all of our housing for our county residents against future funding cuts. So we embarked on a strong program. These are privatization programs to where we get tax credits and then sell them into ownership structures that retain them as public housing or affordable housing. So this is Collier Gardens, which is 150 units of senior housing in Northwest Rockford, which is our $10 million program in 2009. And then from there we did Johnston Garden, which was 50 units in South Beloit. That's Bob Johnston in the middle that I'm sure many of you remember from this board for many, many years. This is the only public housing we have left of everything I'm going to show you tonight. It's just 50 units of Dagnolo housing in Rockton. That's because it's in such good shape and we've done everything else. There's nothing left to do. Westcott Homes, for Fred Westcott. You probably noticed that a lot of these are named after county commissioners. And Fred has served on the board for 18 years and overseen a lot of these programs. So we felt it fitting to do our current development after Fred. And this is a scattered site program where we use homes that are in the community. We want it to blend in so that it looks exactly like what you see anywhere else. We don't want to be able to pick out that this is public housing here. We're just serving families in the community. We have a non-for-profit affordable housing, which is called Winnebago Homes, which is what we use to do this housing development. And we're able to do some fun stuff with it. This is a traumatic brain injury house that we did over in Bradley in Rockford, which helps survivors of TBI. And then through our non-for-profit, we partnered with the National Community Stabilization Trust. This is like a holding bank for banks meeting their Community Reinvestment Act needs. And what we can do is that we can get homes that are vacant and condemned and foreclosed, and we can rehab them. We're selective about this. We will pick a home in a good neighborhood to where that one home will help recover the neighborhood, and that we're welcomed into it. Our very first one was on 15th Avenue. We partnered with Youth Build. And I really love this picture. The kids on the right were high school dropouts who through Youth Build had a job lined up and their college degree right after this program. And then we went ahead and did about 22 of these foreclosed rehabbed homes throughout Rockford and South Beloit. And then we housed Rockford Housing Authority families into them to help RHA with their outreach into the community. And then using this program, we were able to do a home for the Veterans Center. They were losing their site in downtown Rockford because of funding cuts they didn't have. So we were able to partner with Home Depot and National Community Stabilization Trust and to rehab that house you see in the top. And it was an $80,000 project. It was the only house that was on that block that had been vacant about 9 years. It had been broken into many times, used for drug activity. The neighborhood was very happy to see us there doing that. The kids in the bottom were from the open house. One of the veterans being served is in the top left-hand corner. That's Representative Bustos, who visited it and was interested in replicating this program elsewhere in Illinois. And then we also used this to do the Rock House. This is the residency program for the Rockford Police Department. We did this one on 15th Street. And we provide this house for free to a Rockford police officer who lives in the area. I'm sure you've seen the reports on this. On the front of the house, they have a sign with his cell phone number. They meet with the kids in the community so that they feel they get to know the police officers. They meet with the businesses. They meet with the churches. The whole idea is to replicate the beat cop feeling of the 1930s, to where you had a relationship with police officers. We're looking to do another one. Our Section 8 program is about 650 families throughout Winnebago and Stevenson County. I don't know how to show that in a picture, so I just showed a bunch of the kids that are on this program that we had in different programs like Christmas parties and Halloween and such. In 2006, the Freeport Housing Authority asked if we would do their Section 8 program because we had the skills for it. So we've been doing it since then, and that's why we work in Stevenson County. And so our work in Stevenson County grew. We have a strong partnership in that area. We did the Westport Village program just a couple years ago. This is 111 homes that was new construction and rehab. And then we also have a program through the state called the Rental Housing Support Program. This is like Section 8, but it's funded by the state. This serves about 150 families and about 20 sites. There's a couple of them right there, like Valley View. We partner with Zion. And then we've also been managing the Boone County Housing Authority since 2006. They're a strong partner for us too. They have a Section 8 only program, and it's been a natural partnership because we're able to leverage our scale for them so that they don't have to hire an inspector, a housing authority manager, an executive director. They just got me for a couple hours and all that they need for the week, and then our housing counselor and such. And they also have a veterans housing program. And then because of our work in Freeport, the Freeport Housing Authority reached out for us to help them with their development that they just finished, which was the rehab of Hosmer and Brewster. So we do that as well. We administer it and manage the program. Just this year, we got mainstream vouchers. This happened just a couple months ago. This never existed in the area. This is vouchers for non-elderly disabled people. I didn't have pictures of this because we're doing it right now. So I put up pictures of Dina Getty, who's our vice chair of the board, with her therapy dog program for disabled people. And then we got veterans vouchers. This is the first time we've had this in the area. We got 2 awards this year covering Winnebago, Stevenson, and Boone counties. Because this is brand new, I don't have pictures of the veterans being served yet, although we have about 15 of them already having housing. But these are past veterans that we have in our public housing programs. We have a Connect Home program, which links people up to overcome digital divide. We give them handheld tablets, access to the internet, so they can get, for seniors, social activity, for adults, employment, education. We're a demonstration program for the nation. We have a family unification program that helps bring families together. And we're one of just 5 demonstration programs in the nation for youth aging out of foster care. Youth who turn 18, they have nothing. And so they would go to a voucher. We're doing a pilot program, the Graduated Reentry Program, which helps fight recidivism in that area. We have a set aside for helping up to 10 individuals at a time. And this is a partnership with the Illinois Department of Corrections, with Illinois Housing Development Authority, with the Governor's Office, with HUD, and New York University Merit Institute is being funded through a foundation grant. It's a pilot demonstration program for the country. We're pretty excited that it's right here. We've been partnering with the OSF nurses for 20 years. They provide services to make sure our seniors can stay in their housing. That's my board that passes everything that we need to do these progressive programs up on top. We went from about 600 families in 2005 to where we serve 1,600 families now across the 5 counties of Joe Davies, Ogle, Stevenson, Boone, and Winnebago. And we're a HUD-designated high-performer agency. And so what's next is the Regional Housing Initiative Moving to Work program. Because we do a lot of these programs, as you saw with Freeport, with Boone, with Rockford Housing, it makes a lot of sense to align our strategies for housing. The Regional Housing Initiative is one demonstration program in Chicago. We'll be replicating the second one here. HUD has already signed technical assistance, and this would align our policies and such. Moving to Work is a congressionally designated program. We'll be doing the same thing. And then finally, I saved my favorite program for last, which is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. This is a program where families As they achieve more earned income through getting jobs and moving up in employment, their earnings go into an escrow for 5 years that we match to help families move on to something they need, such as a car to get to work or a house that they can buy. We have a very successful program I'm happy to share with you. About 10% of the families take part in this voluntary program for both Boone and Winnebago, and we're one of the top 5 housing authorities in Illinois for this. And so we have Lakia Miller, who's our most recent graduate, here to tell you very briefly what it did for her. Thank you, Lakia.
Thank you.
Miller, and I was on the program for 5 years. I've been with the Hope 6 program for 10 since they first built the houses. It's a really nice program and I really enjoy it. And I like that Alan has set up the Square Fund program because I did it for 5 years. I have $7,424 and now I'm gonna be moving out the program and buying my own home. And I'm glad for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep, that was it.
Thank you, Alan. Let's give him a round of applause. Alan, do we have any other board members here tonight?
Yes, thank you. We have Dina Getty, who's our vice chair, has been on the board for 8 years, and then Alana Connor, who's also been on our board for several years. Thank you very much for coming in, guys.
And Mr. Westcott, thank you for serving on the board on our behalf as well. Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alan.
everyone.
Mrs. Gorel.
Thank you, Chairman. I have known about this group since probably the mid-90s. It is fantastic. One of the best programs, Ellen is absolutely right, is the self-sufficiency program. We have put more people into homes because they went through the self-sufficiency programs. And even when Hope 6, if I'm correct, Ellen, I think many of those who walked through the Home 6 program had to go through the self-sufficiency classes. You have no idea how important, how proud we should be of Winnebago County Housing Authority. They are an example of we are the best example in the United States of what a housing authority should be and what it should look like and how it is run. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll second that.
Mr. Wilson. Mr. Salgado.
Yes, I just want to, I like what I see what they try to do with foreclosed homes and light property. I know that's one of our big issues. I don't know, I know they partner with U-Build and some other organizations, but I don't know if with the city of Rockford, they could maybe join forces and look at community block grants. And I don't know if they're an agency where they can get those kind of grants to administer, to work with U-Build on some of these properties that are out there. You know, I came from Community Action up in Janesville, Wisconsin, Deloitte. I know we have a weatherization program out there, and the LIHEAP program, and I know that they do a lot with low-income families. So maybe that's something that, you know, maybe they do already, but I like the trend that we see that, and to target and to help out not just certain areas, but all over aspects of it when it comes to housing, to potentially, you know, being homeowners and stuff like that. So I just want to give those kudos to them, and hopefully, you know, they can work with the city, the county as well, to kind of target these areas where, you know, foreclosure and obviously blight property with community block grants. And one other note too, I know that I was in DC and I saw Ben Carson, the administrator of HUD out there, and he did mention Rockford, Illinois, for eliminating veterans, obviously homelessness. So he did give us props for that. Not that I'm saying that you know, he's a different party from myself, but you know, we were recognized for that as well. So it's being heard nationwide, not just, you know, statewide or locally. So I just want to give kudos to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salgado. Thank you, Mr. Zeiss. Again, the idea of the blighted property discussion, there's going to be 3 items related to that coming probably in December or January. That there'll be quite a bit of discussion on that topic, separate from this discussion, but aligned with it as well. So again, thank you, Alan, for your time. Thank you to the board members. Thank you, Mr. Westcott, for your leadership as well. We'll move on to our next item of business, which is public comments. I believe Sarah Dorner is here to talk about River Bluff. Sarah, thanks for coming in tonight. Right up here, Sarah.
Can you hear me? Okay. I've never spoken to the county board before, but many of you have heard me speak. My name is Sarah Dorner, and I am a staff representative with AFSCME, Council 31. That's the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And tonight, I am here speaking on behalf of most of the employees of River Bluff Nursing Home, also known as our AFSCME Local 473. While you might think that I would come to speak of the dangers of privatization when it comes to jobs or pensions or benefits or anything like that, the workers asked that I please come and speak to you about the residents and the human cost of privatization. I know that the board has had many discussions about potential privatization of River Bluff, and I would just like to make it clear that we have done numerous studies. Outside entities have done numerous studies, and I implore you to please make an informed decision on this. We have seen an increase in mortality rates at nursing homes that have been privatized. I've heard from some county board members that have said, well, we know River Bluff has been a mess for years. We know that River Bluff has had issues. I would like you to take those issues, now try to extract a profit from that. Okay, so take those issues and give them less resources. We have seen that privatized nursing homes see a decrease in staffing, a decrease in resources, and a decrease in care. The people who are in our public nursing homes are our most vulnerable. They have access to Medicaid services. Most private nursing homes will not accept the residents that are in public nursing homes, many of whom are veterans. So as you have discussions about privatizing River Bluff, I am asking you to please consider where these people will go. How are you taking care of our county if you sell them out? I just ask you to not make a rash decision and consider that people will die. They do. We just thwarted this privatization effort in Stevenson County, our neighbor. Please speak with them. They increased wages, they decreased turnover, and they increased their star rating. This can be fixed, and we would love to partner with you to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Appreciate your time. Next item of business, the approval of minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes from October 11th of 18 and lay over the minutes of October 25th of 18. I got a motion by Mr. Fellers, a second by Mr. Boomer. The item is now before the board. Minutes are before the board. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item of business, announcements and communications. Clerk McCall.
The items listed below were received as correspondence.
And we will place those on file. Next item of business, board member correspondence. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two tonight. The first is the veteran stand down. I just want to give you, and you did a proclamation at the veteran stand down. Thank you for doing that. There were 210 veterans that got seen that day. Of those, 26 were women, and the males were 184. And there was 112 new attendees, include veterans who might not have been there last year to make the sign-in sheet. That's the first one. The second one is Understanding the First World War a century later. It is put on by Terry Dyer, and he talks about things that happened during that time frame. This next meeting luncheon will be Wednesday, November 14th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Part 15, Victory, Not Peace. And it starts at 10:45 and it ends somewhere around 1 o'clock, and the cost is $12. And if you need information, call Veterans Memorial Hall, 815-969-1999.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Appreciate that. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. This might take a minute, so stay with me, please. This past summer, I think I shared this with some of you there, that I attended a leadership academy in Champaign, and that was, and the chairman did as well. And that was sponsored by United Counties Council. That's that group that I encourage us to join, in conjunction with the U of I Extension. Another great group that I encourage us to stay with. At any rate, that was a great set of meetings. There were weekend meetings. We had to go several times for this. But UCCI paid for the hotels and they paid for the meals throughout this whole thing. And so that was at their expense. So now, just last week, I went to Springfield, and there was the annual membership meeting, but it was also the graduation ceremony for the Leadership Academy, which we all got accolades for and so forth, and really quite a big to-do there. Once again, UCCI paid for hotels and meals. Now, because I attended that annual meeting, on top of that, all the other things UCCI's paid for, that qualified the county to receive $400 that somebody from the county went there. And so, the other thing that I learned there, and this was quite a surprise at the meeting, at the annual meeting there, by the way, they tipped us off to some recently introduced legislation, and what they do, everything they do is for the counties. They don't go out and do work for anybody else, it's just for the counties of Illinois. And so there's House bills coming up that really could affect us. There's recorder fees, that's one of them. Metal detectors that have to be in all the schools, that's another one. Lobbyists, of all things, there's lobbyist legislation in there about who can be there and so forth. And then the circuit clerk fees, which is really big. That could affect us in many ways there, because the clerk is able to keep fees, more of the fees within the county instead of sending them downstate. So that's a number of things that I learned were very enlightening there, okay? Now, besides the UCCI giving us $400 back simply because I went there, okay? They're going to rebate the $2,500 that we paid to join UCCI for the year. They will rebate that to us this month, $2,500. So it costs a zilch for us to join this organization, and there's a lot of benefits to it there. As you can see, I'm trying to lay them out to you. Now, on top of that, they announced that this year, for the counties that participated and that want to, they're going to pay the fees for NACO. NACO is the National Association of Counties. And the dues for the National Association of Counties are $5,905 a year. They're going to pay Winnebago County's fees for that. So, in total, so far, the benefits from UCCI, cash benefits, would be $8,805. Now, I say this to you because this is in comparison to the lobbyists that we have, that we paid $5,000 a month. To date, we have paid this lobbyist $75,000, and we have got zero, and I'm saying zero in return. There's $75,000 of taxpayers' dollars that could have been put to much better use than paying a lobbyist. And if you think the lobbyist is there for us, I'm telling you, you're wrong. This lobbyist is a very highly qualified lobbyist and so forth. He has a lot of accounts. He's got near 30 accounts. Look it up online. You can go check this out. And so with roughly 30 accounts for some big organizations and that. We're just pretty small fish. We're not getting any attention whatsoever for 75,000. And to put that in comparison, for our needs, what we really need, our highway department, this year at one of our meetings, Joe said to us we could probably save $25,000 a year if we didn't paint the white stripes on some of our lesser used roads. You know, that's 75,000 bucks. That'd been a lot better off on paint than it would be to give a fellow that has not done anything for us. And I'm telling you, zip. And why we still have this man, I just don't understand. It's just, it just baffles me that I cannot convince my fellow board members that we're paying him for nothing. If we had someone working on any one of our staffs, and we were paying them half that, and they didn't produce, we'd give them the boot. We wouldn't put up with that. Why are we putting up with this? I hope that in the very near future, we can run this through committee or make the motion on the board floor that we end the relationship with this lobbyist. And in the meantime, I encourage you, get online, look to see what you're paying for, look to see the background of this lobbyist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. I'll go to Mr. Jury. The only thing I'd point out is the fiscal year 19 budget, which began on October 1st. Just to correct one thing is there is no budgeted dollars for the lobbyist. So that is not an active commitment in this fiscal year as approved by the board. That was a fiscal year 18 commitment. I would respectfully disagree with some of the value propositions. However, just to be clear, currently there is not a commitment that was communicated to the lobbyist and a discussion point, and also it is not in the fiscal year 19 budget. Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. I was going to convey this to Mr. Webster that we're no longer paying that individual the money every month. Although I do have a question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, for legal. Did we sign a contract with the individual when we started? And if so, do we need to bring forth a resolution officially canceling the contract?
I do not know. On the second, we can get to that, but we have communicated the budgetary constraint for the fiscal year to the gentleman who's the lobbyist. We can check on that and confirm, and if we need to run something through, we're happy to do so.
I'm just asking from legal points. We don't get, how often we get into legal battles. So I would like an answer on that, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can get that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't recall. I would imagine this has been a couple of years ago that we did enter into a contract with them, but I don't have the contract in front of me, so I can't say what the terms of it are, or how long the term was, Mr. Jury.
Well, if you look into it, let me know, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you. Fred, when you brought this in on your committee on economic development, the host fees, that was still a line item on that, was it not? I pointed it out to you the day that you had the meeting, and I said, Fred, what is this on that line item? And it was 75,000. I mean, it was 5,000 once again per month out of the lobbyist, out of the host fees.
I could confirm that that was through the host fee fund. It was not out of the general fund. It was not out of the 1%. It was not grant funded. It was, in fact, a line item approved by the board in the host fee. Yes,
exactly. And the point is that's still taxpayer money. That's not manna from heaven. So we've already wasted 75,000. I'm saying end this thought of paying someone for nothing.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Webster, for sharing your opinion. I just want to reiterate, just so there's no confusion in the room, number one, the dollars did come from host fee. Number two, the communication to the lobbyist has been that we do not have the budget for that commitment this year. It is not, currently, he is not working as our lobbyist, nor is he being paid for such, so there's nothing, in fact, to, and we've communicated that very clearly, and I want to communicate to you very clearly, that's where it's at. I would respectfully disagree with my friend Mr. Webster on to the value. However, we do have budget constraints. Appreciate that, and that was a discussion a little bit in the budget process as well. I would also say that it's not a new topic, that there was some disagreement over who the lobbyist was when we selected that. And Mr. Webster's first choice was not the one I recommended, and that was a source of contention, and I will point that out for the record. And I think we're moving forward, and we will have a good legislative strategy without engaging a formal lobbyist this year, and look to maximize every possible opportunity to work with the new governor, the new legislator, and we'll maximize our results the very best we can. Yes, Mr. Jury, on a follow-up.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up and touch on something Mr. President said. And I've said this time and time again, that the highway department is broke. Ladies and gentlemen, the highway department has no money. Our roads are deteriorating at a fast rate. You need to sit down and come up with a way to fund the highway department or give them some money so Joe can go out and have federal grants matching funds. What happened to the $75,000 we were paying him? I don't know, I'm just asking a question. Do we have any money in reserves that we can fund to the highway department? You need to take care of the highway department, and it's very urgent. Our roads, drive on them, look at the shoulders, look at the edge of the road. They're deteriorating. And when you drive on Perryville, you think you're on a washboard from your grandmother. It's terrible. And we're going to try to prosper in this county. Drive to Boone County. Drive to Stevenson County. You need to come up with some money to give to Mr. Vanderwerth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jury. Speaking of highway, there will be an update by Mr. Vanderwerth in the next month, and it's a pretty comprehensive analysis of the state of our roads and bridges in Winnebago County. Very interesting topic. Any other board members before I go back to Mr. Webster a third time? Mr. Webster.
I just wanted to set the record straight about something you just said, was that I had a different choice than the lobbyist that you chose. And no, I did not have the choice at all. I made that clear to you. I didn't think we needed one at all. We had no reason for the lobbyist. What I had told you, though, was in lieu of paying this man $5,000 a month, we had another candidate there that was going to do it for half that amount. And you didn't share that other candidate, who was our former state representative, Dave Winters. You didn't share that information with the rest of us. So I want to set the record straight on that. We could have got a guy for half the price and someone that only had 2 clients, not 30 clients. And he's a former state rep, knows his way around down Springfield pretty well. And that's the bone of contention that I had. I wasn't suggesting anyone. I said, if we've got to have someone, let Mr. Winters do it. He offered his services for half the price.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster, for this is the 3rd time or 4th time we've discussed this issue on this board floor, and I understand and I respect the difference of opinion. And I'd also say that we do not currently have a lobbyist, just so we're clear. Thank you very much. Any other discussions by board members? Okay, with that, I'll move on to the chairman's report. The one topic I have for tonight is the potential appointment of a new state's attorney. Obviously, you followed the election results, as did I. It would appear, although it's not official, for up to 14 days, that our current state's attorney, Joe Briscato, may very well have won and been successful in his race for a judge. If that plays out in that fashion, he will be giving his resignation effective on December 3rd, which is when any new officials are sworn in. in the county. So today began the call for applications. The criteria are very specific and driven by statute, as is the timeline. Number one, since Mr. Briscato, our current state's attorney, is a Democrat, it does by state law need to be a Democrat. Number two, it has to be a licensed attorney at law in the state of Illinois. And so we are taking applications, a letter of interest, a resume, and proof of being a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. We will have an open application period. People can submit their applications to our office through the close of business on November 14th. On the 15th and perhaps on the morning of the 16th, we will have open interviews. All board members, the community, any stakeholders are welcome to attend. We will communicate this very clearly. All information related to applications, letters of interest, proof of voting history, which determines party affiliation, any other associated materials that are shared will be shared publicly and directly with the board. All board members are welcome to attend the meeting, the open meetings as well. There will be a recommendation to the county board posted on the agenda. The plan is on November 16th. We post our meeting agenda for the next board meeting on Tuesday, November 20th, which is the last meeting of this board. It is also, we moved that board meeting up because of Thanksgiving from Thursday to Tuesday. So applications are open. We are welcoming them and accepting them. We will be doing interviews. Again, all are welcome. And look forward to that process. We need to have a state's attorney sworn in on December 3rd, which our opportunity on November 20th is for the board to consider the recommendation as they would other recommendations at that time. Number one, it has to be a Democrat. There has been, I want to thank Mr. Hoffman, our Democrat caucus chair, for some discussions. That is something there. I do not believe that will be an issue. We want to make sure we're on the same page and respect the fact that by state law, a Democrat holds the position and a Democrat will be appointed to that position, looking for input from all stakeholders, including the folks in this room. We will make a recommendation and then it's in the board's hands to approve or not to approve on the 20th, but we do need to have a state's attorney on December 3rd. I saw a hand up and I apologize if I missed somebody. I got Mr. Jury, then I have Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman, and I thank you for your process in which you are going to go about it. However, in the past, the outgoing official, in this case it would be State's Attorney Briscato, usually would make a recommendation who he would like to fill that position. And for party unity and unity on this board, I would certainly hope whoever Mr. Briscato would suggest would be considered. After all, he is the state's attorney, duly elected by the Democrats, and I just think we don't want to overlook anything and do it very fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jury, and I think I saw one more hand up. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would as strongly agree with Mr. Jury's comments there, and hopefully that's the path that this process would take. And if it comes down that there is an interview process, we get those packets of resumes, would you please give us a timeline schedule as far as when those candidates will be issued, so when it's not sitting there for 2 days through the whole process, position specific candidates that I would like to be involved with.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Very good point. So when we get resumes in, we're going to share them publicly and directly with the board. So if we get, going into tomorrow, any resumes we have in hand or received heading into the weekend, you'll receive and they'll be made public. As they come in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we will share them as quickly as we're able to get them turned around and out to folks. Absolutely. So appreciate the comments. I have Mr. Salgado, and then we have Mrs. Crosby. Mr. Salgado.
I guess maybe this is a question for Mr. Kurlinkus and yourself, Mr. Chairman. The first question I kind of have is, I know there's state statute, but also I know that we're in this process of, your recommendations going to come through to us. Is there any set structure on the process that either whether we have a policy procedure in place for these types of things? I know we went through the county clerk office, and where there was some, well, is he truly a Democrat, Republican, those sorts of questions. And then the other piece, that there was an election coming around, so, you didn't want to, those things, appoint someone that was a potential candidate, those sorts of things. So I don't know if there is anything besides that statute that maybe we can implement as a county, through the county board, both looking at Republican, Democrat, and independents, whoever, obviously is the party affiliate that is holding, the office, but to give some structure at least, so there isn't this, well, let's take into consideration this piece, let's take this other type of thing into consideration. At least there's a set standard process throughout the board, and would be legally be okay with setting those standards or parameters, so when it comes to the board, we're all set to go.
Mr. Kalinkas, would you like to speak to that?
Well, Mr. Salgado, as you stated, that there's a statutory basis for having the vacancy filled by a member of the same party as the elected person. That's by statute. There really isn't anything statutorily that you have to go through as far as the process for interviewing people, determining what that party, I call it affiliation, but the membership in the party, what determines that. Typically, it is the voting record in the primary elections, but that would have to be something that would, I guess, be done to the satisfaction of the members of the county board of that party, and maybe the county party committee. I don't know how that is, but there's no requirement as to how that process goes. If you wanted to set up some sort of procedure in the future for the criteria that you would prefer to have examined, you certainly can do that, but it's not required by state statute.
So to Mr. Salgado's point, the difference between the county clerk position and the state's attorney, there are some similarities, there's differences. Similarity is both were Democrats, both outgoing office holders were Democrats and will be filled by Democrats. That's the same. What's different is the proximity to the next election cycle. So in the case of Margie Mullins retiring 1 week after the ballot was set, the timing of her announcement of retirement was after the ballot was set. Candidates were on there, and as a matter of personal preference, my recommendation to the county board for their consideration and approval or rejection would be that somebody on the ballot not be recommended. That is a policy position, not a statute position. In this case, we do not have a ballot that is set. The election is behind us. So we have 2 years between right now and when Mr. Briscato otherwise would have completed his term. So there's no ballot. Since there's no ballot, there's no names on the ballot. At this point, we got to accomplish 2 things in the time frame of December 3rd. Number 1, a Democrat. Number 2, make sure it's a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. And I guess I would throw in the third, the very best fit that meets those criteria. And I think we all want to make a quality-based decision. The decision ultimately lies in the hands of the county board. Yes, follow up, Mr. Salgado.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, perfect example. I mean, I wasn't questioning your judgment or your recommendation. Just simple fact that, what we've seen, through the county clerk, about, we heard about affiliation and, in an election, those sort of certain things that I think procedurally we should have those written down as some sort. So there is no point of view at the voting or questioning on the recommendation why things were done X, Y, and Z. Everybody has their judgment call, their recommendation, but at the end of the day, those are the things that we need to hash out before the whole process, because then, it gets heated, everybody, you can't please everybody, I understand that, but at the end of the day, those are the things we want to get out the way and throw them out the window before they actually start distorting the process and actually, kind of pushing towards the best candidate or the qualified candidate.
I think you're hitting on a very important point, and I would just assure everybody this is, I think that in some discussions with Mr. Hoffman, our Democratic Caucus Chair, he expressed that we want to make sure that there's not great debate over whether or not this person would be perceived as a Democrat. To me, as a Republican, I want to make sure that Democrats see the people, the person we're recommending, and the pool that is officially interviewed with Democrats, people who are seen as Democrats, have pulled Democrat ballot time after time, and are seen by true blue Democrats as a Democrat. I think that takes care of it. What I do not see, and has not been the case, and let's get this right out on the record because we want to do a good job with this. Everybody on the board does, I do, we all deserve that as a community. I wouldn't want to, and nor will I, focus on particular policy issues. For example, I wouldn't get into a national debate on a social issue on that determination. One of the things I talked about, we're going to pull voting records, and I would look for feedback. If there's any debate and somebody does not have a consistent voting record, I would turn and make sure that's pointed out, and I would want to make sure that all 20 of the folks in front of me are comfortable that we respect the fact that a Democrat holds the position and that a Democrat will be considered and appointed as the next state's attorney, because if the shoe was on the other foot, I think there would be a boatload of Republicans who would ask for the same courtesy, and I think we all want to extend that. I think communication on any case-by-case issues and making sure that true Democrats see this person or even the candidates that would push through to interview as true Democrats, that's important to me. I think it is something that has the credibility of respecting the party affiliation. Then the crop of candidates who are determined to be Democrats, then we want to make the best recommendation from that pool. And I think that's a very fair point, and we want to do a good job, as I believe we did last time as well. I think I have Mrs. Crosby, then I have Mr. Tassoni, and then Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Crosby.
This is for Mr. Korolinkas. I was told today that by a local attorney that it would be a conflict of interest and a violation of ethics if the state's attorney made recommendations. True or false?
Can I jump in on that? Because I have spoken to Mr. Briscato. Mr. Briscato said he is not going to be weighing in on this because of the position he'd be going as a personal preference. So I don't know what the legal thing, I'll defer to legal, but he's put it on record to me that he does not want to be on record as a soon-to-be judge weighing in on a potential member of the state's attorney's office. He didn't want to go down that road, but in terms of legal, I'll refer the legal to legal.
Thank you. I am unaware of any legal or ethical issue that would prohibit him from making a recommendation at this point. I'm just not aware of any.
Thank you, Mr. Kurlinkus. Thank you, Mrs. Crosby. Did I miss Mr. Tassoni? Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a comment from what Ms. Crosby said, if Joe's, if it would be not necessarily unethical or immoral, whatever, to recommend, maybe it would be appropriate if his second in command made a recommendation to who the best person would be. And besides that, what can you tell us, Chairman? What will be, how will you make the short list of the interview process? If you get 40 candidates, how, can you break it down as far as you're going to go to 10 or 5 or whatever it may be, how do you make the short list?
So on the 14th in the afternoon, I will be in touch with our Democrat caucus chairman, and by that point there will be no surprises as to who's applied, and we'll talk through that, but we will be, as a general rule, unless you're otherwise disqualified, there's going to be every effort to interview folks. If there becomes a reason or some consensus as to not to interview, or there is just a plethora of candidates and there's too many, and then there would be a segmentation, then there would have to be, as part of the process that I'm facilitating, decisions made along that, and I would reserve the right to do that. I do not see, given the level of this position, we had 10 applicants for county clerk. This has the added issue of being a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. I anticipate, in talking to kind of a cross-section of folks, there's an anticipation of far less than 10. We will deal with that if we get to a large number. I anticipate there being alignment over who's a Democrat and who passes the smell test as being a true Democrat, and I anticipate alignment, not dissension over who all would be interviewed. If we get to a larger than anticipated number, then we will make every effort to be as inclusive as possible. I cannot guarantee everybody that would apply would be interviewed. I cannot, as is true with any application process. I would also want to have some conversations and not make arbitrary decisions. That's a fair question, but this consensus seems to be that we will see less applicants on this round than we did last time. Could I be wrong on that? Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. But we will be in communication. We know this is an important appointment to the community. It's an important appointment to the board, and we will over-communicate. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make mention that prior to 2016 and back, it was always decided by the party that was this person belonged to, and their representation. Like Charlie Lasconis for the Democrats and the other fellow for the Republicans. And then it was, from the Democratic Party, it came to the Winnebago County caucus, respectfully, if it's Republican and or Democrat, then to you, and then to the board. And lastly, I'd like to know whom besides you and Joel will be partaking in this interview process.
Thank you very much. Well, hopefully you, Mr. Wilson, will be part of the interview process because the meetings are open and we will be taking feedback along the way from anybody that wants to add feedback to the process. So for those board members that want to be involved, you can be at every open interview. We can have discussions as often or as little as you choose to have. And I'm very open to quite frequent discussions with those that really want to be involved on that front and middle part of the process. Obviously, when the recommendation comes forward to the county board, then it's in the board's hands and only the board's hands, and I respect that. But if you would like to be part of every minute of every interview, I would welcome you. I would say err on the side of being involved and err on the side of giving feedback. I think there's an opportunity here for what you're referring to in terms of inclusion in the process, being able to share. It will be taken very seriously what the opinions of our partners on the board are, as well as others, and that should help inform the process. The performance of the candidates, their backgrounds can be part of the discussion. I believe fully, my understanding is that there will be discussions by the Democrat caucus as a whole. I also believe that the Democrat Central Committee will probably have discussions in alignment or separately with your caucus, sir. And I'm sure there's going to be opinions shared and recommendations made, and they're welcome. They're not in any way secluded or pushed out of this process. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not about the other issue we were talking about. First of all, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank everyone in Tuesday's election that was on the ballot, whether you be Democrat or Republican. Congratulations to all of you. You know, in this world we have so much contention and unrest. The election's over. The people of Illinois have made their decision. The new governor is my governor. Not my party, but he is my governor because we live in a democracy. I wish we could just have that feeling throughout the whole country, and somehow we don't. Another thing that I intend to do is to get a hold of the mayor of Rockford. You all know that we placed on the ballot the combining of election authorities. It was overwhelmingly decided that people want to see Winnebago County have one election authority. I'm going to meet with Tom McNamara and some aldermen of the city of Rockford to make sure that they press on with that issue. It was an advisory. The people have spoken. Now it's time to listen. And also, I'm going to ask them They do not need an election commission. We have election commission right here in Winnebago County that we don't pay any individuals to run our election. We pay the county clerk, the circuit clerk, and the state's attorney. I'm going to move on this. We all talk about saving money. It's high time that we save money whenever we can. And I'm going to push that issue. Thank you.
I think thank you very much, Mr. Jury. To your point, I think there's two ways in which you see single authorities in counties. One is to have it under the county clerk. The other, to Mr. Jury's point, that it's under a commission model of some sort. So both exist in the state of Illinois. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. To your other point, Mr. Jury, we do have 3 board members who will be joining us next month. Tim Neighbors, Jazz Billick, and Paul Arena are all here this evening. Thank you for joining us, and congratulations. If we want to give them a quick hand. With that, I'll conclude the chairman's report. We'll turn things over to Carla. Carla. I believe Carla has an update to a question that was asked at the last board meeting related to some financial situations. Carla.
Okay. Last meeting when we were talking about the pension bonds and our unfunded liability, Mr. Schultz had a question or a comment that we would like to make sure that in the future, once we pay off our unfunded liability, that we don't let it accumulate again. So I just wanted to overview some of the reasons that we do develop an unfunded liability. And I want to give thanks to Lisa Elenardo, our senior accountant. She delved into these union contracts and developed these charts to kind of make clear what I was talking about last meeting. I spoke with our actuary today that worked on the pension bonds, and for fiscal year or calendar year 2017, IMRF, when they developed their actuarial valuations and determined what our actual required contribution needed to be, they used an assumption that salaries would increase 2.5%. So what we did was we took a wage growth for an FOP employee that's been here for 20 and a half years. And you'll see that that employee started at $13.74 and today makes $42.13, which equates to an annual growth rate over the period of his or her service at 5.62%. So their wages are increasing more than that 2.5% increase that IMRF is using. The next page is an employee that started in 2013 under the FOP contract and has worked for 6 years. They have gone from a wage of $22.71 an hour to today $35.02. which is an annual growth over 6 years of 7.48%, but an increase since starting of 54.21%. The AFSCME contract's a little different over a 19-year period. The annual growth has been 5.55%, which is a little bit lower, but again, more than the 2.5% that IMRF is using. And then AFSCME over 5 years, an annual growth of 5.06%. So under the FOP contract, there are steps. In years 0 through 6, you get a step every year of your employment. And then a step occurs after that point in time every 5 years, 10 years, 15, and then 20 years of service. And then those steps stop after your 20th year. But then you also get longevity. Under the FOP contract, at least 5 years but less than 10 years, you get 2% of your hourly base pay for your longevity. Between 10 and 15 years, you get 6% of your hourly base pay. From 15 to 20 years, you get
10% of your hourly base pay, and then 20 years and over, you get 12% of your hourly base pay. The ASME contract that currently is expired, and we're in the process of negotiating, after 3 years of service, you get 1% annually for your longevity. So to Mr. Schultz's point, I think we're going to have to continue to work with an actuary on an annual basis to look at the union contracts and what our actual increases are, because if we just continue to contribute what IMRF requires, we're again going to probably work into an unfunded liability situation.
And if I could follow it up, Carla, the question Mr. Schultz asked is what we were dealing with last board meeting with funding that, dealing with the gap, is how do we not get there before? Am I saying that right? So just so we know about this presentation, I think your specific thing was going forward, how do we avoid this? And I think this information speaks to one of the things you're seeing. Is that correct?
Correct. So I think we'll have to.
I don't mean to speak for you, Mr. Schultz. I just want to make sure we're time.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want us to budget for the actual impact of our liability on an annual basis. So whatever that is, the actuary will help us, but that's the amount that we have to budget.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Biondo.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, these longevity is in addition to any contract negotiated raises too.
Correct.
And the fact that, well, I was used to lanes and steps, but this is similar. And when those contract negotiated wages go up, the whole bracket moves up. Everything that's on this graph moves up by whatever percentage that was. I looked at inflation, I believe I looked at like 2003 to 2018, and inflation had went up, about 90-some%. And so if we go out a couple more, maybe it's 100, 102, but this is double that, especially this long one. So it's double the rate of inflation. I don't know anybody that gets that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Biondo. I see a couple of hands. I think Mr. Salgado, then Mr. Webster, Mr. Salgado.
Yes, I have a question, and maybe this is for Mr. Karolinkas. During these negotiation contracts with the arbitrator, I'm assuming, right, it's through arbitration or mediation?
Mr. Karolinkas.
Arbitration only comes in with the FOP contract.
Okay.
There's no, because it's a public safety-based bargaining unit, they're entitled under state labor law to have binding arbitration.
So based on that, is this some sort of evidence or documentation that we could present to the negotiating party, the median person? I'm not, like I said, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know, like, when these negotiations are going, because this is a fair statement from my perspective. IMRF is budgeting or whatever, saying 2.5%, but we've seen, as a contract negotiation, puts us in an unfunded liability portion where we're actually going to have to foot another 3% or whatever it is based on, obviously the increases in wages. So just wanted to see from your perspective, is this something that we could present, obviously, as a bargaining unit when we're negotiating these things to essentially say, let's come to a constructive, more realistic. I understand there's all these other intricacies that have to be looked at, but is this something that could be presented to them when they're negotiating these types of contracts?
Mr. Karolinkas.
We certainly discussed this. The longevity that you have in there is built into the contract. I mean, I don't know when this went in. It was that longevity. The figures that you have here were in the contract before I ever got here. So, unfortunately, what you usually see at the bargaining table is and I think this is what Mr. Biondo was talking about, what is the concern and discussed at the bargaining table is what is the annual increase. And unfortunately, Many arbitrators do not take into account longevity as really money that's spent on the contract. I've been before arbitrators that viewed it that way. Well, that really doesn't matter. We don't care about that. How much are the annual increases that you're looking at? But sure, I mean, absolutely, we talk about this at every negotiation we have. We're talking about it with FOP contract is completed. We're talking about with AFSCME now as we negotiate through. Absolutely, and we look at it and try to present to them, and Carl does a good job giving us the figures as to what the cost of the contract is going forward. Not a big concern, unfortunately, on the other side of the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salgado. I believe I have Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess my question, Carla, is these annual growth rates, the percentage, I'm talking about percentage. Some were 5.6%, and then some went up as far as 7.48%. How do these percentages, not their annual wage, but the percentages, how do they compare to public sector, private sector versus the public sector?
Private versus public?
Yes.
In my experience, we got much lower increases in the private sector, and a lot of times it would be based on performance where you get a bonus that didn't carry over to the next year.
Okay, so I'm just curious, like, sometimes we have nothing to do.
Okay, yeah, we can do some research on that.
And so the public sector is generally quite a bit higher than the private, you think?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, if we could pick just curiosity's sake, if we could pick, say, Chrysler employees,
Okay.
what their percentage rate is.
I think that's a general point. We could come back to that maybe in a committee meeting and drill down a little bit.
Yeah, I don't expect the answer right now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Squirrel.
Many of our employees, if I remember correctly, are on the AFSCME side, are they not?
A large number.
A very large number. I'm looking at the increase in this, and I'm wondering that since our people at River Bluff wages are like, let's say, starting wages at $12, how do they figure into this? Because they don't get this type of an increase in their wage every year.
They get the same as corrections. All the AFSCMEs get this, except for the circuit clerk, get the same increases.
Thank you.
They don't have a step system like the FOP.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Squirrel. Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, Ann just had a few brief comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla. Ann.
Thank you, Chairman and Carla. Everyone's gotten a handout that I prepared on, we've talked several times in the past year about wanting to have an auction. Well, we're using this new auction site that's strictly for government sales. And I hope it'll be successful for us. And we're starting out, we've sold a couple of vehicles on there, and now we're starting out with the sheriff's evidence locker items. So please take a look and bid, because the money goes back to general revenue. So I know you need a new bicycle or something. And the other thing that Carla wanted me to talk about was earlier in the year, I think it was like January, February, we requested to hire a consultant to help us with a line audit for AT&T. I can very easily report we're at least at a $50,000 a year savings with the lines we shut off, and there's going to be at least another $30,000 we'll be shutting off in the next month or so. So it was definitely worth that $24,000.
Thank you very much, Ann. I appreciate that. And thank you, Carla, for the update. I'm sure there'll be more discussion going forward. Next item of business, the approval of the consent agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the raffle report and consent agenda? Motion by Mr. Jury, second by Mrs. Crosby. Any discussion on the consent agenda before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item of business, Finance Committee, Mr. Biondo.
now that I'm retiring, I'm not sure how I'm gonna pay for all this red ink. Because I use it a lot. Those questions. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing I'd like to do is basically move to, for consideration of an ordinance amending the ordinance that we adopted last time for the general obligation bonds for IMRF, unfunded liability, which from 17 to 32 million. And it was 50 to start, and we went down to 17, but then this last quarter, I guess the investments made by IMRF was 0 instead of 7.5 or so. So consequently, we're just giving them a different amount of money just in case it goes up from where it was, but still doing the same thing.
So you're reading that in?
Yes, yes, I'm reading that in. But it's an ordinance, so do we have to read it in?
We would have to, you've read that in now if you would like.
Yeah.
If you do not make a motion to suspend the rules, then it will lay over to the next meeting.
Okay, then I guess I would like to lay it over. I'm sorry, I'd like to move to suspend the rules.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Biondo to suspend the rules to take action on item 2 under the finance agenda tonight. I got a second by Mr. Jury. The item before the board is to suspend the rules, so we could then separately vote on item 2. Any discussion by board members on the motion to suspend? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We've suspended the rules. Mr. Biondo.
Okay, I'd like to move to pass the ordinance, raising it, the amended ordinance, raising it from 17 to 32, and I do have one question.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Biondo to increase from 17 to 32 million, and I got a second by Mr. Jury. Item is now before the board, and Mr. Biondo, I'll go to you for your question.
All right. Basically, since this one quarter had a 0 versus whatever they're saying they're going to invest, what would a 0.5% or 1% change in a quarter do to their liabilities? I'm just wondering how bad it would get. Apparently this changed a lot since it came out to be a 0.
I'll go to Carla, or I think we have counsel in the back for a quick answer. Back again.
Because what I'm worried about is that we would get the problem where we get our unfunded liability paid, and then the investments start changing rapidly, and we're paying our other our regular funds, and now do we wind up with some more unfunded liabilities due to their investment?
Okay, I really don't know what would happen for 1% versus 0%. Recall the presentation last week was that they've earned 7.5% average for the 20 or 30 years. So one bad quarter shouldn't make any difference. But yes, obviously, had they been earning as much this year as they earned last year, we would have been still at 17 million. But one of the difficulties is, as we've talked in the past, the actuary keeps has come up with different numbers. At the beginning of the year, if you recall, when we went to the finance committee, it was $44 million was the need. It was reduced then to 17. The results through September 30th, especially if you looked at your own accounts, were pretty poor. October has been really, well actually November has been very good for the stock market in the last couple of days. So they're probably back very close to their 7.5%. But the actuary got information as of the end of the second quarter and as of the end of the third quarter. And that's what's reflecting now. So they can't get information out of the IMRF every week or whatever.
So would this then put us out maybe in the first quarter of next year, so we see what happened in the fourth quarter here? Or would we still be selling the bonds sometime in the next 2 months?
We expect to sell the bonds very soon, invest the money, because they only accept the money in December.
Okay.
And then as to next year, when the report comes out from the actuary, you'll either see that you have no unfunded liability, or you have an unfunded liability because of investments, or because of, as the discussion earlier, about the 5% versus the 2%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any follow-ups, Mr. Biondo? No?
No, it was unanimous in our committee, it passed.
So we have an amended, or we had a motion to suspend the rules. The item before the board is moving from 17 to 32 million. That's before the board right now. Any other questions by board members before we vote? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Seeing none, we'll cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Biondo.
All right, thank you. I'd like to read in Budget Amendment 28-039, Kids Place Budget Transfer to be laid over.
Thank you very much.
And then I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules. This is actually, it was unanimously approved in our committee, and it's basically winds up being zero. They're going to transfer some money from the court to the Kids Place budget because they're under budget by a little bit this year. Nice to hear that.
We have a motion. We have a motion by Mr. Biondo to suspend the rules.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm already discussing.
That's okay. Motion by Mr. Biondo to suspend the rules and a second by Mr. Wilson and Mr. Jury. The item is now before the board. That item is to suspend the rules. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We've suspended the rules. Mr. Biondo.
Okay, I'd like then to move to approve the budget amendment 2018-039 Kids Place budget transfer.
Got a motion by Mr. Biondo on the Kids Place budget transfer, number 3 on the finance agenda, second by Mr. Jury and Mr. Wilson. Again, thank you, and Mr. Salgado. Item is now before the board. Seeing no hands up, this is a great organization. I'm glad we're helping them out, and I appreciate the leadership out of the courts making this work. So thank you very much, Chief. Any other questions, board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, next I would like to read in the budget amendment 2018. We've changed that to, was that the 2019? Yeah, it's 20, it's going to be out of this year's budget coming up, so it should be, we're going to just name it 2019-040. Center of Excellence, the final cost to be laid over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, then I'd like to move to suspend the rules.
Okay. We got a motion by Mr. Biondo to suspend the rules to vote on 2019-040, which is the Center of Excellence final costs. Got a motion to suspend, second by Mr. Jury. Thank you. Item before the board is to suspend the rules. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, just one. What was the final cost?
It's $20,337.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Thank you, Mr. Biondo. Item before the board is to suspend the rules. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We've suspended the rules. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, then I'd like to move to approve budget amendment 2019-040.
We got a motion by Mr. Biondo on the Center of Excellence budget amendment, second by Mr. Jury. Thank you. Item is now before the board. Any discussion or comments by board members? Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I said this at committee, but the reason that we have this overage, as I understand, is because of vacation pay. And the explanation was, well, we never can or do budget for paying out vacation pay because we don't know when people are going to leave. It's when they leave that we pay it out, and that means that every time someone leaves, it creates a budget overage that we're not prepared for. And so my recommendation at committee was that we develop a pool of funds based on the average amounts of money we've paid out for vacation, accrued vacation when people leave, and that we use that pool of money to deal with circumstances like this. Because this is a grant-funded item that because employees moved over from other departments with accumulated vacation, you have a grant-funded item that you don't have the money to pay these vacation expenses when the people leave. That doesn't appear to me to be good planning. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. Any discussion, comments by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, item 5 is budget amendment 2019-06, K-9 costs laid over from October 25th, 2018 meeting. And, I'd like to move for its approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo on the K-9 costs laid over from the 25th of October. A second by Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Jury, and Mr. Gurl. The item is now before the board. Any questions or comments by board members? I'll go to Mr. Fellers first. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious here because there was an article in the paper last week that the sheriff already took delivery. I'm curious how that happened without the budget to do so. Can someone answer that?
Maybe I will, if it's okay, I will go to, can I ask that question to Mr. Carner? Mr. Carner. I'm sorry, Mr. Carner.
We did take delivery of them. I believe it was because of timing of training, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so if I heard you right, it was because of a timing issue related to training was your answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Fellers, on a follow-up.
As a follow-up, I mean, there's no guarantee that this passes tonight. It still has to pass. What would we? We've been through this with employees before in other departments that you don't do things that will cost money without a budget amendment associated with it. I mean, how many times have we had this conversation about budget amendments and spending and making sure that they're aligned first?
Well, the thing is, they did have the money for the dogs, and the training and the food for a year, etc. My question was, what do we do after that? And that never got answered. So,
Mr. I think that's a fair question. I'm going to go back to Mr. Carner.
Ongoing, the incidental expenses will come from the drug forfeiture account because that's part of their assignment. In addition to that, there's a fee that they're only, there's a current fee that's being assessed that will allow them to be self-supporting too. It's to be cost neutral.
So thank you, Mr. Carner. So what you're saying is there will be no additional costs this year or in future years that would hit our general fund or our 1%. It would be covered through the drug fund. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Biondo, did you have a follow-up?
No, I just wondered if everybody had the information they needed.
Any other questions by board members on this item, the budget amendment related to K-9 costs that was laid over from October 25th? Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're accepting money that was donated. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And the sheriff has communicated with me, and I'm sure several other people as well, that the legacy costs of this will come out of the drug forfeiture money. So we're arguing over getting a gift of $50,000 and something that's going to be paid for other than general revenue. I think this is a terrific opportunity, and I appreciate the kind-heartedness of the person that did this.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Mrs. Gorel.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we have this down in writing that this is the way it'll be so that 2 years from now, all of a sudden, we're not taking this money out of our general fund because they've switched? Is this, etched in stone, or is it just spoken out there that we just assume this is what they're going to do?
So if I'll jump in on that, and then if anybody else wants to, Mrs. Gorel, is we can, out of this meeting, certainly send documentation, and we have minutes from this meeting where we're specifically saying that there will be no new cost to the general fund or the 1%. I think it's a fair concern with our budget scenario, but we can also make sure that's well documented. It's on the record in this meeting, and it will be on the record in a follow-up communication between the departments, and I can include the board just as a courtesy and out of respect as well. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gorel. Any other follow-up comments by board members? Seeing none, with this being a budget amendment, we will need a supermajority, 14 votes. Is that correct, Mr. Kurlinkus? Okay. With that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Boomer?
No.
Mr. Biondo?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Fellers?
Yes.
Mr. Fiducia?
Yes.
Mr. Gurl?
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Jerry.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Nicolosi.
Yes.
Mrs. Red.
Yes.
Mr. Salgado.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
No.
Mr. Tassoni.
Yes.
Mr. Webster.
Yes.
Mr. Westcott.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
18 yes, 2 no.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, the last item is I'd like to move to approve Budget Amendment 2019-008, Administrative Secretary Replacement, Sheriff laid over from October 25th meeting.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo on the 2019-008 Administrative Secretary replacement laid over from the last meeting. Second by Mr. Jury. Thank you very much. Item is now before the board. Any discussion, questions, comments by board members?
I have one.
Yes, sir,
Just
Mr.
one.
Biondo.
We had the $1.4 million deficit, I guess, for the sheriff, and that's why we have to do the budget amendment. And then what I'm adding is, does this secretary leaving, our administrative secretary replacement, does that actually add to that 1.4, or was it there to start with? You know what I'm saying? It's, I'm saying obviously somebody was there, they terminated, and retired, whatever, and I'm just saying, was that money already budgeted in the 1.4? Or is this gonna make it, 1 point, something else, 1.423?
Carlo.
The money was not budgeted because he started the year over budget.
Over budget,
If the employee would have continued in the position, they would have been paid. But in leaving the position and before it's filled, and since there's a budget shortage in that particular piece of the sheriff's budget, not 911, not the jail, this particular piece, that's why it's just run through the board before that is happening. I see Mr. Carter shaking his head yes, so just so we're on the same page. Any other discussion? Thank you for the clarification, Carla. Any other discussion on the item before the board? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mrs. Crosby.
Yes.
Mr. Biondo.
No.
Mr. Booker.
Yes.
Mr. Boomer.
No.
Mr. Fellers.
Yes.
Mr. Felucia.
No.
Mr. Girl.
Yes.
Mrs. Gore.
No.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Jury.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Nicolosi.
Yes.
Mrs. Red.
Yes.
Mr. Salgado.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
No.
Mr. Tassoni.
Yes.
Mr. Webster.
No.
Mr. Westcott.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
$14 yes, 6 no.
Motion passes. Because it's a budget amendment, it needs 14 votes. Motion passes.
Yes, it
Mr. Biondo.
does. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo. Next item of business, zoning committee. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Mr. Kerlink, as there was a question brought up, whether it's actually legal to use drug forfeiture funds for future expenses. Can we get a check on that from the statute? Because I just read up right now and I'm not entirely sure it is.
We can follow up on
Are you
that.
going to follow up on that, please?
Yes.
I know. Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer right now, Mr. Fellows. I'd have to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
We will follow that up. Thank you very much, Mr. Fellers. And as Mr. Webster's on his way up for zoning committee, Mr. Gurl.
Thank you, Chairman. Would that drug forfeiture money be able to be used for that fiscal year for K-9 costs, seeing that the K-9 actually found the drugs? And wouldn't that be part of the cost or associated with that money?
My understanding is the dollars when they come in are available, but we can clarify that so it's absolutely clear.
I don't think they're planning on using that money for the life of the dogs, to set that aside from that money, so
Yes.
if we get some clarification, that'd be great.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Gurl. Mr. Webster.
Before I forget, I want to thank all the board members for their donations for the sock drive for Carpenter's Place. Once again, this is the second year we've done that. So many of you brought in socks and some others brought in money. So it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for doing it.
Okay, zoning committee this evening, we have 3 items on our agenda. All of them are to be voted on. Z1418, Z1618, and an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance. So number 1, Z1418, came ZBA recommended denial, zoning committee recommended approval. So there you have it.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, thank you, Mr. Webster. I got a motion by Mr. Webster on Z1418, the map amendment. May I have a second, please? I have a second by Mrs. Crosby and Mrs. Corral. Thank you. The item is now before the board. Any discussion by board members? Yes, sir. Mr. Tassoni, then Mr. Fellers. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This happens to be out in my district there. I'm familiar with the area well. I've had a lot of local concerns from some residents in the area, and I would just respectfully ask my fellow board members to consider a no vote on this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Fellers.
With other legal objectors on this?
There's no legal objectors, no. It's a simple majority vote. Yes. I thought that was on variance.
So let's, Mr. Kurlinkis, I'm going to put you on the microphone so we're all on the same page.
Okay, I was just asking Mr. Webster if the ZBA had denied it. And my understanding is that a map amendment that's denied by the ZBA would require a 3/4 vote of the board.
Yes, Troy.
My understanding, it only applies to variations.
Okay, thank you very much. The item before the board is Z1418, the map amendment in Mr. Tassoni's district. Mr. Jury, Mr. Jury.
Thank you. This is a hard one. I'd like to ask staff, if I may, Jim. Does this meet the 2030 plan?
Troy or Chris, could you speak to that?
It meets the 2030 land use plan map. However, it does not meet the siting criteria of the zoning district.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy. Thank you for the question, Mr. Jury. Item before the board is Z1418, the map amendment in District 5. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on this so we're clear. Clerk McCall.
Mr. Fellers,
No.
Mr. Biondo,
No.
Mr. Booker,
No.
Mr. Boomer,
No.
Mrs. Crosby,
No.
Mr. Fiducia,
No.
Mr. Girl,
No.
Mrs. Goro,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
No.
Mr. Jury, Mr. Kelly,
No. No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jury,
No.
Mr. McDonald,
No.
Mr. Nicolosi,
No.
Mrs. Red, Mrs. Delgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz, Mr. Tassoni,
No.
Mr. Webster,
Yes?
Mr. Westcott,
No.
Mr. Wilson,
No.
17 no, 3 yes.
Thank you. Motion fails. Mr. Webster.
Okay, next is, number 2 is Z1618. This is also a map amendment. This came with a recommendation of approval from ZBA and a recommendation for approval from the zoning committee as well. This is my district, District 2.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Webster on Z1618 map amendment in his district. May I have a second, please? Second by Mrs. Crosby and Mrs. Grohl. Thank you very much. Item is now before the board. Any discussion by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please cast a no vote for Mr. Schultz and a yes vote for all other members present. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster.
Okay, finally we have an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, with regard to retreat centers. And this is county-wide because it is amending the development ordinance. The ZBA recommended approval on this one, and so did the zoning committee. So I'll move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Webster on the ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance, and I got a second by Mr. Boomer. Item is now before the board. Seeing no questions or hands up, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster.
Okay, I have one more announcement. This is of particular interest to my zoning committee members. Our next meeting, because of this holiday schedule and that, our next meeting will be Monday, November the 19th, 2018, at 5 o'clock. Because that Monday is caucus as well. And so we have one item on the agenda. And if we can get that done at 5 o'clock, that lets us all move forward to our caucus meetings at 5:30.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Also,
sorry
for interrupting, but also, that was the only night we could, or day we could get room 303 for a meeting place. We're going to need it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Yeah, Monday.
Mr. Biondo, did you have a quick question?
Basically, I forgot to inform my members that we're going to be on Tuesday, November 13th, rather than Thursday.
So we have a finance meeting this Tuesday instead of this coming Thursday. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Webster, and thanks for your leadership on the sock drive. Next item of business, Economic Development Committee, Mr. Westcott, and we will be pulling, I apologize for not saying this at the top, I believe we're pulling item 3.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a ordinance in front of us. It's for a resolution authorizing execution of the intergovernmental agreement with the Rockford Park District for tax abatement for Magic Waters leasehold, and I so move.
We got a motion by Mr. Westcott on the Economic Development Committee on the resolution authorizing the IGA with the Rockford Park District for a tax abatement for the Magic Waters leasehold. I got a bunch of hands for seconds. Mr. Fellers, Wilson, Mr. Biondo, Mr. Jury, and Mr. Hoffman. Item is now before the board. Oh, I'm sorry, and Mrs. Red. Item is now before the board. Any comments, discussion, questions? Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say we've had a lot of conversations about this. We had a chance to meet with our district and Mr. Westcott. This is one of those opportunities, I think, that comes to this area once every 50 years. This is an absolutely fantastic opportunity for a partnership with a national company with a major marketing budget, who's going to bring lots and lots of people to this region. So I would encourage everyone to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Any other comments, questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. We have Mr. Webster and Mr. Schultz are no votes, yes votes for all other members present. Motion passes. Mr. Webster and Mr. Schultz, no votes, all other members yes. Motion passes. Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a county or a economic development meeting on Tuesday at 5:30. I'm not sure what room yet.
We have an economic development meeting on Tuesday, and thank you, Mr. Sandine. Have a good night. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Westcott. Next item of business, Operations Administrative Committee, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. Your Operations and Administrative Committee has several resolutions before you this evening. The first one was laid over last week and I'd like to speak to it when I'm done, when you're done. Is an ordinance amending sections of Chapter 62 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinances. I move for its adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. We have a motion by Mr. Jury on the ordinance related to the cell phone policy. May I have a second, please? A second by Mr. Gurl, Mrs. Gurl, Mrs. Red, and Mr. Hoffman. Item is now before the board. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Jury.
Thank you. You just passed something that needed to be done for a long time. I would like to thank Mrs. Crosby and the committee that she led, and along with Gus Gettner for coming up with this policy. We're going to return approximately $22,000 to the general fund by this policy. So it's a good thing, and I thank all of you for supporting it. Everyone's not going to get a cell phone anymore, and I think that's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jury.
Thank you. The next one we have is a resolution for pharmaceutical supplies for River Bluff Nursing Home, and I move for that adoption also.
Got a motion by Mr. Jury on the resolution awarding the pharmaceutical services at River Bluff, second by Mr. Hoffman, Mrs. Gurl, Mrs. Red. Item is now before the board. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. I'm just reading my notes here if you want one moment. The next one, we have an ordinance, this is a reading for its first reading. We have an ordinance amending sections, Chapter 62 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinance, and that's read for first reading.
Okay.
And I would like to suspend the rules.
Oh, okay, real quick here.
I might have one, excuse me. I have one in order. Just a moment.
The Sun Life.
Yes, Sun Life, hold on.
Okay.
Okay. The next one, we have an ordinance for a resolution authorizing the execution of renewal agreement with Sun Life Financial for stop loss specific aggregate coverage for self-insured CO, pay, POS, PPO, and HDHP medical plans, and I move for its adoption.
We got a motion by Mr. Jury on the resolution renewing Sun Life Financial for stop loss, second by Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Jury.
Thank you. The next one it's an ordinance amending sections Chapter 2 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinances, and it's surplus property disposal policy to be laid over, and I would like to suspend the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. We've got a motion by Mr. Jury to suspend the rules on the ordinance related to surplus property. May I have a second? Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Crosby, Mrs. Gurl, Mrs. Red. The item before the board is to suspend the rules. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We've suspended the rules. Mr. Jury.
Thank you. Now I would move for its adoption because this ordinance has been long overdue. We have not had a surplus property disposal ordinance. It just depended if it was used, it was put in the corner, if it was there 2 weeks, or it was there 20 years, it was gone. I'd like to thank Carla and Ann for coming up with this policy. And again, this was long overdue. I move for its adoption.
Got a motion by Mr. Jury on the surplus property disposal policy. Second by Mr. Westcott, Mr. Booker, Mrs. Gurl, Mrs. Red, and I think I saw Mr. Hoffman's hand up. Any discussion by board members on this ordinance? Yes, Mrs. Gurl.
I just want to, thank you, I just want to tell Mr. Jury is absolutely right. This should have been done years ago. That's why we have all this accumulation that should never have been around. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gorel. Any other discussion by board members? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. This is another ordinance amending sections, chapter 62 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinance. And this is a vehicle policy to be laid over, and I wish to suspend the rules again.
We got a motion by Mr. Jury to suspend the rules on the vehicle policy, second by Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Let me stand corrected. And for the record, Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Gorel, and Mrs. Red. My apologies. The item is now before the board. Clumsily, we rolled this one out, my fault. Items before the board. Any discussion by board members? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Seeing none, we'll cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Mr. Haney, I'd like to speak to this. This is another ordinance that was long overdue. Well, this is going to save the county, you, when you do your budget next year, some money. I'd like to thank Carla and Ann again for coming up with this policy. You know, people for too long have been driving home and back and forth to work using company vehicles and paying nothing. It's all going to change. It'll bring back money to the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last, we have another ordinance amending chapter 50 of the Winnebago County Code. This is the County Food Ordinance Code to be laid over, and again, I would like to suspend the rules.
We got a motion by Mr. Jury to suspend the rules, second by Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Gorel. Item is now before the board, and I want to thank Dr. Martel for being here this evening as well. Any discussion by board members? The motion is to suspend the rules. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We've suspended the rules, Mr. Jury.
Now I move for its adoption.
We got a motion by Mr. Jury on the County Food Code policy ordinance change. Second? Do you have a second? Mrs. Crosby, thank you very much. Item is now before the board. Any discussion on the County Food Code change? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Okay, I will ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. We've passed this unanimously. Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. We also, in the Operations Administrative Committee, will be having a meeting on the 13th. So kind of look at your emails when you get those. So we have everyone there. And thank you very much.
13th is Tuesday, is that correct?
Tuesday, right.
Tuesday. We got 3 meetings then on Tuesday. Okay.
That concludes our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jury. Next item is Public Works Committee, Mr. Kelly.
No report.
Next item of business, Public Safety Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
No report.
Thank you. Any unfinished business? Seeing none, new business. We've got a couple of appointments tonight in for first reading. Want to welcome Tom Hodges, who is in the back, as well as Tom Walsh, a retiring assessor. That is the appointment. The first is item A. The appointment of Tom Hodges to Supervisor of Assessments is in for a first reading this evening. I see a couple hands up. I don't know who was first, but I see the one highest, and that is Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would love to suspend the rules on this particular appointment.
Thank you. I got a motion to suspend by Mr. Wilson, a second by Mr. Fellers and Mrs. Gorel and Mr. Jury, and I think Mr. Biondo, just so I'm clear. Item is now before the board. Right now the vote is to suspend the rules. If we suspend the rules, we can vote tonight. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have suspended the rules. Thank you very much. Now the item is before the board. I would entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Fellers to approve the appointment of Tom Hodges as our next Supervisor of Assessments, and I see a hand up for a second by Mr. Wilson, Mr. Biondo, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Jury, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Tassoni jumped in, Mrs. Red. Item is now before the board. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Webster.
No, not much discussion, just comment. I would heartily encourage board members to vote for Tom. Our outgoing supervisor of assessment, Tom Walsh, who is, in my estimation, the highest caliber that we could have to deal with county business there. And he has vouched for Tom Hodges. And Tom, I'm sure, will come to us with and abide by the highest standards and work ethics that our outgoing supervisor has. And so I really welcome him there. He's been under Tom's tutelage for a bit now, so.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Webster. Thank you very much. And I know there's some other folks who are here this evening. I see Mr. Ewing from the Board of Review. I see Mr. Crowley from the Assessor's Office in Rockford. Yes, so good to see you. Thank you very much. And I know I'm missing somebody as well, so I apologize if I'm missing somebody. With that, the item before the board is the appointment of our new supervisor of assessments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Congratulations, Tom, and the person next to you, in between you and Mr. Walsh.
This is my lovely wife, Amy.
Welcome.
Hi, Amy.
Welcome, Amy. Thanks for putting up with all of us, so thank you, Amy. Next item of business, board appointments, Northwest Fire Protection District, Matt Lawrence, filling Philip Tim's vacant spot for Cherry Valley. That is being read in for a first reading. I have a hand up, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would move to suspend rules on that item.
Thank you very much. I got a motion to suspend by Mr. Tassoni, second by Mr. Earl. Item is now before the board. All those in favor signify. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We've suspended the rules. I would entertain a motion to approve our Northwest Fire Protection District appointment of Matt Lawrence. May I please have a motion? A motion by Mr. Tassoni, second by Mr. Gurl. Item is now before the board. All those in favor of appointing Matt Lawrence to the Northwest Fire Protection District signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much on both appointments. With that, I would take a motion to adjourn. Oh, excuse me, I'll back that up. Mr. Jury has his hand up. Mr. Jury.
Oh, God, I forgot this. I forgot my countdown. Wilson, Biondo, Jury, one more, and we're gone. Thanks.
We're clapping because we're happy or we're sad? Motion to adjourn. Second. I got a motion by Mr. Feller, second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Have a good evening. Thank you.